Welcome back. We're continuing our discussion on Canadian energy policy. And here we have Dan McTeague, the head of Canadians for Affordable Energy. Thanks again for joining me, Dan. Before we went to commercial break, we're discussing inflation. And we left with the BC gas price presently at $2.09 a litre, which is a painful price. We know things have gone up in price. Inflation is a big factor. What role does inflation play vis-a-vis the price of gas in this country?
Well, inflation has everything to do with the price of gasoline and diesel. Don't take my word for it. StatsCan now for the second month in a row has said wherever gasoline fuel prices go, that's where inflation is going. We saw 2 months ago inflation dropped, and the government took great credit for it. But it had everything to do with the comparison year over year from gasoline. So, we look back June of 2022, average prices in Canada, $2.15 a liter. Back in June 2023, that dropped to about $1.50. So you can see where inflation was driven very much. Same for last month. Although the rate of inflation had increased by half a point, all of it was directed, or a good amount of it was the result of inflation. And so you have to, as I mentioned earlier at the end of our last segment, what is troubling is those policymakers and those who are analysts are looking at this and saying, well, maybe we should just continue to increase the price of energy and not consider its implications for the overall price or effect on inflation, which in turn has the Bank of Canada, sitting back saying, well, we'll raise interest rates because inflation is going up. Look, the buck stops with energy prices. When you mess around with energy prices, you get higher food prices, you get higher electricity prices, the cost of living goes through. And as a kicker, because Canada loves blocking pipelines, our Canadian dollar is suffering. That's adding to the lack of purchase power for most Canadians.
Yeah, and we've seen countries, emerging markets that have lower energy prices, how they're able to really boom with their industries, look towards India, China, and why it's important that those governments keep their energy prices low and their economies thrive. So how much will this new increase which started July 1st, how much is this going to cost the average household? Like, how should the average household prepare?
The effect is only in the Maritimes, Atlantic Canada, and BC for now, where refiners have simply passed on the the carbon cost to consumers. And that will continue to grow as, of course, the requirement to meet that rigorous standard. Remember, most climate economists will tell you, and William Nordhaus being the best one, he won a Nobel Prize for this. You don't have a carbon tax and add regulations like a second carbon tax, a clean fuel standard. You don't add, pipeline blockages, regulations, emissions caps, all of these other things that Mr. Guilbeault and his pals, who have nothing better to do but to ruin a perfect economy, are layering on, larding on, if you will, and the effect of which is hurting and harming consumers. I think we've hit a point of inflection. We've talked about the creation of Canadians for Affordable Energy going back 7 years now. It's pretty clear now for the past couple of years that affordability has gone from the fourth, third, fifth top most important issue to the number one issue. And it is pretty apparent to people that as we increase the cost to respond to these climate regulations and these layering on of ridiculous taxes, it's not having an effect on the climate. It's not having an effect on emissions. What it is doing is undermining the Canadian economy and the ability for people to make ends meet.
And I suppose that is what the government's objective is, right? This is what the stated objective is with these new taxes, with the clean fuel standard is, well, we need to combat climate change or clean carbon emissions and combat carbon emissions. Is that the case? Is that what the objective of these taxes are?
The objective is insanity. The effect, of course, is to diminish and to destroy a country. Look, there's no other country in the world doing this. We're not, to put it in perspective, I knew we had trouble in 2020 when during the COVID outbreak, we were the only country in the world that decided it was cool to raise a carbon tax. And so if you have this kind of insane policy guiding you that has no basis in fact, and you're just doing it to be trendy so you can, whisk off to international events to, swill back Perrier and eat canapes and say whatever wonderful job you're doing with your friends, sooner or later, the public is going to push back. And I think, Tanya, it's pretty clear the public has had enough. They're fed up with this. And you cannot use the idea that warm weather or forest fires or floods or hurricanes are somehow going to be mitigated or changed because Canadians are forced to, to live in a state of nature eating acorns and living in a retrograde environment in which they have to abandon everything. It doesn't make sense. And I think many Canadians are starting to become pretty aware that this government's got it terribly wrong and it's destroying the nation, as well as
Yeah.
its principles.
Yes, I have concerns, especially as we head into the winter. What households will be contending with. We're going to pick up this discussion in just a few moments.